The pen was already in my hand when my son smiled and slid the papers closer, too smooth, too sweet. Still, I nodded like a trusting mother, flipping pages while he kept pouring coffee like nothing was wrong. As his voice coded over legal terms, the scent of cinnamon filled the kitchen, his favorite, not mine. While he joked about just routine stuff, I found a clause that didn't belong in a family. The same hands I once taught to write were now betting on me not reading. That's when I set the pen down and called my lawyer before I called him my son again. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Sunday dinners used to run on muscle memory. By 4:30, my hands were already chopping onions. By 5, the oven was warm. By 6, my little Denver kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic and the kind of stability you think you can count on just because you've repeated it long enough. Headlights finally swept across the living room wall, and my heart did that small lift it always did hope. Automatic and stubborn. Ethan came in first, loud with cheer like he could fill the house with his voice alone. "Mom! Sorry, traffic was insane." He kissed my cheek, smelling of cold air and cologne. And for a second, I saw him as the boy who used to burst through this same door with scraped knees and a grin. Tara followed with a bottle of wine cradled like a gift. She looked polished, the kind of woman who could make a grocery store feel like a runway. "You look great, Maggie," she said. I thanked her, took the wine, told myself not to notice how her eyes skimmed the room the way Ethan's did, quick, assessing, like they were measuring something. Dinner went smoothly. Too smoothly. Ethan talked fast about deals and almost there, and laughed at his own stories. Tara praised the food, refilled glasses without asking, kept her phone face down but close. I asked the right questions. I nodded in the right places. I played my part, the grateful mother, the steady foundation. When dessert was finished and I started washing dishes, Ethan didn't drift off to the living room like he used to. He stayed in the kitchen, hovering. He rolled up his sleeves like he meant to help, then just stood there watching the water run. "Mom," he said, and my hands paused in the suds. "Yes?" He reached into a messenger bag and pulled out a thick folder, clean, crisp, professional-looking. He slid it across my counter toward me like it was no big deal. The label on the front had my name typed neatly in black. Margaret Lewis. "I need you to sign something," he said. My stomach tightened. Small and instinctive. "What is it?" His smile came quick, charming, practiced. "Just routine stuff. Power of attorney. You know, for when you travel. If something happens, makes paperwork easier. Travel. Something happens. Paperwork." I stared at the folder without touching it. The house was suddenly too quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The faucet dripped once, twice, like a clock keeping time I hadn't agreed to. "I'm not going anywhere," I said lightly. "It's not about that," Ethan replied. "It's just being prepared. Everybody does it." Tara leaned her elbows on the counter like we were sharing a harmless secret. "Every family does this, Maggie. It's smart. It takes stress off everyone." "Off everyone?" I forced a smile because that's what I've always done when I don't want people to see me thinking. "Did your lawyer send this?" Ethan's eyes flicked away for half a second. "A guy. A professional. It's standard." Tara tapped the folder with a manicured finger. "You can sign tonight and we'll be done with it." The word tonight landed wrong, like urgency dressed up as convenience. Like a door they wanted closed before I looked out the window. I lifted the folder at last. It was heavier than paper should be. "I'll read it in the morning." Ethan's shoulders loosened, relief flashing so fast he probably didn't realize I saw it. "It's nothing complicated." "I don't sign anything without reading it," I said, keeping my tone gentle. Tara's smile held, but something behind it cooled. "Of course." They left soon after. Hugs and cheerful goodbyes. The kind of exit that's meant to feel normal. The moment the door shut, the house fell into silence so complete it felt like pressure in my ears. I stood at my counter staring at my own name. Then I opened the folder and the first page stared back at me in crisp black print. At the top, in bold letters, was a title that made my mouth go dry. The title at the top of the page looked harmless enough: Durable Power of Attorney, the kind of thing you'd expect in a bank brochure. Something adults did so their kids wouldn't have to deal with paperwork. But the paper didn't feel harmless in my hands. It felt deliberate. I moved to the kitchen table where the light was brighter, slipped on my reading glasses, and told myself not to be dramatic. Denver winter pressed against the windows, the house already cooling now that Ethan and Tara were gone. I could still smell garlic on my fingertips, like proof that tonight had started as something normal. The first paragraph was legal padding. Then my eyes found the line that changed the temperature in my body. Full and irrevocable control of all assets upon signature. I stared at it, waiting for it to soften into a kinder meaning. It didn't. My heart started beating too fast. Not like panic in a movie, just hard, relentless thuds, like my body trying to warn me before my mind caught up. I read it again. Slower. Full. Irrevocable. Control. Then I kept reading. Because once you see the edge of something sharp, you can't pretend it's smooth. The document didn't speak in vague generalities. It listed my life like an inventory. My address. The legal description of my home. My pension account, with numbers I didn't like seeing in print. My checking and savings accounts. The life insurance policy I'd kept even after my husband died because I'd promised myself Ethan would never be left scrambling. It was all there, typed cleanly as if it belonged to someone else. My mouth went dry. And then my brain did what it always does when it's cornered. It supplied memories. Ethan's new car last month, parked in my driveway like a glossy question mark. He'd laughed when I raised an eyebrow. Good deal, he'd said. Don't worry about it. The business loan before that, the check I'd written because he'd looked tired. Because he'd said it was temporary, just a bridge until a deal closed. 2 months, he'd promised. 3, tops. He never mentioned it again. And I never pushed, because I didn't want to be the mother who didn't trust her only son. My hand began to tremble. I set the papers down and pressed my palm flat to steady myself. Then I picked them up again and reread the same sentence twice more, like repetition might change the outcome. It didn't. A knock sounded at my front door, 3 brisk taps, and I flinched. For a second I expected Ethan's voice, some laugh, some forgot my keys moment that would snap this back into normal. Instead, Helen Ward stood on my porch with a foil-covered dish in both hands, cheeks pink from the cold. "I made too much cobbler," she said. Then her eyes narrowed. "Maggie, what happened?" I stepped aside and she came in without waiting, because Helen had never been the type to hover on thresholds. Her gaze landed on the open folder on my table. "What's that?" I didn't trust my voice, so I just held out the page with the sentence on it. Helen read fast. Then she read slower. The muscles in her jaw tightened. The same expression she used to wear when she talked about patients who'd been taken advantage of. She looked up at me, voice low and fierce. "That's not a favor. That's theft wrapped in legalese." The word theft hit me so. Cleanly it stole my breath. Before I could speak, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text lit up the screen. Ethan. "Hey Mom, just so you know, I scheduled a notary to come by tomorrow morning. Quick and easy. Love you." I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Helen's cobbler sat between us, warm and untouched. And all I could think was, he didn't just want my signature, he'd already set an appointment for the moment I'd lose everything. Helen didn't leave after she said the word theft. She set the cobbler on my counter like it was an anchor. "Call someone," she said. "Not Ethan. Not Tara. Someone who gets paid to tell the truth." I stared at Ethan's text until the screen dimmed. The little "love you" at the end made my stomach twist, like a bow tied around a trap. "I don't even know who to call," I admitted. Helen's eyes stayed hard. "Yes, you do. There's always a person for this." By 9 the next morning, I was driving downtown with the folder on the passenger seat like it might bite. I'd slept in scraps. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those words, full and irrevocable. And then Ethan scheduling a notary like he was ordering pizza. Downtown Denver was all sharp winter light and glass buildings. I parked too far away on purpose, walked 2 blocks with my shoulders tight, and followed a directory up to the 5th floor. Julia Bennett's office was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Gray chairs, a low table, A framed photo of the mountains that looked calmer than real life ever does. When Julia came out, she didn't rush. Mid-50s, hair pulled back, eyes steady. She shook my hand like she meant it. "Margaret Lewis?" "Maggie," I said automatically, then wondered why I was trying to soften anything. "Come on back, Maggie." Her office was neat but not sterile, organized piles. A clean desk. A single mug that read, "Read the fine print." I stared at it long enough that she noticed. "It's not subtle," she said, "but it's accurate." I sat and slid the folder toward her. My fingers lingered on the edge like letting go would make it real. Julia opened it without ceremony. She read the way my best students used to read, focused, exacting, unwilling to be charmed by formatting. Pages turned with a steady rhythm. Then her mouth tightened. Not surprise recognition. She stopped at the clause, the one that had kept my heart sprinting all night. "This isn't a standard power of attorney," she said. My voice came out small. "He said it was routine." Julia tapped the paper with her pen. "This is an asset transfer dressed up as authority. And the wording here," she traced a line with the tip of the pen, "is designed to lock you out once it's signed. No clean revocation." The room seemed to tilt. I swallowed hard, feeling ridiculous and ancient at the same time. I whispered the part that embarrassed me most. "My son gave me this." Julia leaned back slowly, like she was choosing a door to walk through. "Then your son doesn't see you," she said, careful but blunt. "He sees an account balance." Heat climbed my neck shame first, bright and humiliating. Because I'd raised him. Because I'd handed him money like it was love. Because I'd wanted to believe family made you safe by default. Then the shame cracked into something cleaner. I straightened in my chair. "What do I do?" I asked. Julia didn't hesitate. She reached for her phone and her calendar in the same motion. "First, you do not let a notary into your house today," she said. "Second, we move quickly. People don't push this hard unless they think the window is closing." My purse vibrated on the floor. I pulled out my phone. Another text from Ethan. "Notary confirmed for 10:30. I'll be there. Make some coffee." I stared at the smiley face until my fingers went cold. Julia watched me read it, then held my gaze. "They're coming to your home because it's familiar," she said. "Because familiar makes you compliant." Outside her window, the city moved like nothing had changed. Cars. People. Sunlight on glass. Inside, I felt something settle into place, quiet, steady, unmistakable. 10:30 was in less than an hour, and my son thought I was going to pour coffee while he took my life. Julia didn't try to calm me down. She treated the situation like an approaching storm, something you prepare for, not something you argue with. 10:30 is leverage, she said, glancing at the clock. He's counting on you being polite and overwhelmed. We're going to give him neither. She slid a yellow legal pad toward her and began writing in neat, decisive lines. "We're building a wall around your assets, a living trust. You stay in control as trustee. If you ever can't act for yourself, you choose who steps in. Not him." "A trust," I repeated, tasting the word like it might be too big for my life. "It's just structure," Julia said. "And structure is protection." Her fingers moved to her phone. "Next, we update everything that makes you vulnerable will. Healthcare proxy, beneficiaries, people. Forget those pieces. The wrong person doesn't." She dialed and put the call on speaker. "Daniel?" "Julia Bennett." A familiar voice answered, steady as a metronome. "Julia, what's going on?" "I've got Maggie Lewis here," Julia said. "I need a full audit today. Any unusual transfers, authorizations, withdrawals, everything." There was a beat. Then Daniel's tone softened. "Maggie, are you okay?" Hearing him grounded me. Daniel had walked me through retirement planning with patience and plain language, never making me feel small. "I'm figuring something out," I managed. "Okay," he said like a promise. "Give me an hour." Julia ended the call and looked straight at me. "Now we buy time without lighting a flare. Text Ethan. No confrontation. No accusations. Just normal." Normal felt like a costume. But I put it on. My fingers finally steadied as I typed. "Woke up with a bad headache. Can we push the notary to tomorrow? I'm going to lie down. Love you. Julia watched the message send. Good. Keep him hungry. Let him think the plan is still working. The next 2 hours were a blur of signatures that protected instead of surrendered. Julia explained each document with surgical clarity. The trust, the updated will, a new healthcare proxy that didn't include Ethan, pension beneficiaries revised with the kind of precision I used to admire in good students. She floated an idea as she drafted. We can place the trust under a foundation in your name. Financial education. Senior protection. Something that makes your money harder to weaponize against you. A foundation, I murmured, imagining my life turned into a mission instead of a pile. Daniel called back just after 1. Julia put him on speaker again, and I watched her expression tighten as she listened. Maggie, Daniel said, there's a transfer from last month. 10,000. Labeled as a family loan. It's tied to Ethan's information authorization routed through access connected to him. The words didn't shock me as much as they sealed something shut. My son hadn't only planned to take. He already had. Julia's voice stayed calm. We locked down access today, alerts on every account, retitle assets into the trust immediately. When I got home, Helen was waiting like a crew chief. No sympathy, no hand-wringing, just boxes and tape and motion. We gathered the things that couldn't be replaced. My husband's watch, my mother's ring, old photo albums, heirlooms that carried memory more than value. Helen wrapped each item carefully, like bandaging skin. Revenge isn't anger, she said, sealing a box with a sharp rip of tape. It's order. My phone buzzed. Tomorrow works. Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle everything. I stared at the screen until the comfort in his words curdled into something else. Outside my front window, a familiar black car slowed at the curb, sunlight glinting off the hood like he couldn't wait until tomorrow after all. The black car didn't just slow at the curb, it stopped. I watched from behind my front curtain, heart steady in a way that didn't feel natural. Ethan got out like he owned the sidewalk, like this was a quick errand and not a turning point. Helen appeared behind me, silent, wiping her hands on a dish towel like she'd been waiting for the moment I'd need an extra backbone. My phone buzzed. Ethan, I'm already here. Just wanted to check on you. I opened the door before he could knock. I made my face soft, my voice small. Oh, honey, I said, pressing a hand to my temple. I really do have a headache. His expression flashed annoyance, then charm sliding back into place. He kissed my cheek like a dutiful son. I'll make it quick. A woman stepped out of the passenger side carrying a leather bag. Professional, neutral, the kind of person who's learned to ignore family tension because it's not in the contract. This is Karen, Ethan said. Mobile notary. Since I was in the area, I figured we could just get it done. Karen gave a brisk smile. Hi, Miss Lewis. We'll only need a few minutes. Helen's eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak. I caught her gaze and gave the smallest shake of my head. Trust me. Julia had prepared a revised version that looked identical at a glance, right down to the layout and the harmless title. She'd pointed to the critical differences with a calm finger. Limited authority, temporary access, and language that made it legally voidable. Enough rope, she'd said. Not enough to hang you. She'd filed a copy with the court the same day. Time-stamped. Logged. A decoy with teeth. Now I stepped aside and let them in. Ethan moved toward my kitchen like he belonged there, already reaching for the coffee mugs. You don't need to do anything, he said, generous as a thief. Just sit. Karen will handle the rest. Karen set her bag on my table and pulled out her stamp and ink pad. I'll need your ID, ma'am. My hands didn't shake when I handed over my license. That surprised me most. I opened the folder I'd placed on the table earlier. Julia's version. Ethan didn't even glance at the pages. He watched the pen like it was a finish line. I know this stuff is stressful, he said, voice warm. But it's smart. I'll make sure your bills are handled. Insurance, utilities, whatever you need. The words should have sounded loving. Instead, they sounded like ownership. Karen pointed to the signature line. Sign here and here. Initial these boxes. I signed. I initialed. Each stroke felt like stepping onto a narrow bridge I'd built myself. Karen checked my ID, stamped the pages, and slid them into her bag. "All set," she said. "You'll receive a copy as well." Ethan's smile widened. Relief flashed across him like sunlight. "See? Easy," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "You did the right thing." I returned a tired smile that gave him exactly what he wanted. "I'm glad it helps," I said. He left with Karen a moment later, his black car pulling away like nothing had happened. Only when the street went quiet did I let out a breath I'd been holding since dawn. Helen turned to me, voice sharp with restrained panic. "Maggie, what did you just sign?" "It's not what he thinks," I said, and that was all I could manage without my composure cracking. 2 hours later, Daniel called. His voice had changed, no small talk, no warmth. "Maggie, you need to call Julia. Right now." My pulse jumped. "What happened?" "He tried to transfer funds," Daniel said. "It triggered the bank's fraud alerts immediately. Automated notice went to Julia's office the second it hit. My phone buzzed. "Ethan, good news. I took care of a few things for you." "You're welcome." I stared at the message, the wink like a knife. He thought he'd won. And somewhere downtown, Julia now had proof he'd walked straight into the trap. Ethan texted 2 days later like Sunday at my house had never happened. "Dinner at our place. Tara's making that salmon you like. We'll talk about next steps." Next steps, like my life was a checklist. Julia told me not to refuse invitations. "Let them perform," she'd said. "People who think they're winning get sloppy." So Helen drove me. She didn't ask if I wanted the company, she just pulled up with her engine running and her phone on the console. "Julia's on speed dial," she said. "If anything feels off, I press it." Ethan and Tara's neighborhood was newer than mine. All clean sidewalks and matching porch lights. Their house smelled like expensive effort. The second the door opened, garlic, butter, citrus, something sweet in the oven. Tara greeted me with a hug that lingered half a second too long, perfume clinging like a claim. "Maggie, come in!" "We went all out," she said, steering me toward a table set with candles and folded cloth napkins like we were at a restaurant. Ethan poured wine without asking. "To Mom," he said, lifting his glass. "For trusting us." I took a sip I didn't want. "To family," I replied, letting the words sit there, neutral. Dinner was elaborate salmon with lemon caper sauce, risotto, asparagus arranged like it had been measured. They watched me eat the way you watch someone sign a contract, waiting for the moment that means yes. Halfway through, Tara set her fork down with a soft click that felt rehearsed. She leaned in, smile smooth. "We've been thinking about your future," she said. Ethan's eyes sharpened, eager. The candles flickered between us like a staged warmth. I smiled like I didn't understand, like I was still the woman who would nod politely while they rearranged her life. "Oh," I said. "My future's already protected." Ethan stiffened so fast it was almost comical. Tara's eyes flickered just a flash before she rebuilt her smile. "Of course," Tara said lightly. "We just mean simplifying. Less stress. Downsizing someday. And bills," Ethan added, setting his glass down a little too hard. "I've been handling some things, so I've noticed," I said, still pleasant. "But I'm covered." A tight silence settled. Tara broke it with dessert, voice bright, offering tiramisu like sugar could patch over tension. Ethan kept scanning my face, trying to find the old version of me. Through the front window, I could see Helen's Subaru at the curb, her silhouette still inside, phone in hand. When I stood to leave, Ethan hugged me at the door. His arms felt familiar, but his body was tense like he didn't trust what I might say. I held him a beat longer and whispered into his ear, soft as a mother's reminder, "Always read what you sign." His grip tightened, then released. As Helen pulled away, my purse vibrated. An unknown number. The preview line on my screen made my stomach drop. "Bank Fraud Department. We need to discuss recent attempted activity on your account." The number kept ringing in my purse like a warning I couldn't ignore. Helen didn't ask permission. At the next light, she reached over, tapped my screen, and put it on speaker. "Answer it," she said. "Right now." I swallowed. "Hello? Miss Lewis?" The voice was calm and practiced. "This is the fraud department at Rocky Mountain Federal. We detected an attempted transfer flagged as unusual activity. Can you confirm whether you authorized a 5-figure outbound wire?" My stomach tightened, but my mind went oddly clear like a chalkboard wiped clean. "No," I said. "I did not. Thank you," he replied, shifting into action. "We're placing an immediate hold on outbound transfers pending verification. I also see a power of attorney document submitted very recently that authorizes a third party. Can you confirm the name Ethan Lewis?" The air in the car felt thinner. I could hear my own pulse, steady and hard. "I need you to speak with my attorney," I said. "Julia Bennett." Helen was already dialing. Julia answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting for the sound. "Put them through," she said, voice crisp as paper. I handed the call off and stared out the windshield at traffic moving like nothing was happening. Julia's side of the conversation was measured and surgical, no emotion, only instructions. "Yes, correct. The document is limited and voidable. Revoke third-party access effective immediately. Note that this was an attempted transfer. We'll provide the court-stamped copy." Daniel's voice joined briefly on another line, coordinating with the bank like a man who'd been holding his breath for days. Within minutes, the fraud rep confirmed what mattered. Ethan's access was being shut down, login permissions, transfer authority, every pathway he thought he had. Alerts were set to notify Julia and Daniel if my account so much as twitched. When Julia came back to me, she didn't soothe. She organized. "Maggie, document everything," she said. "Dates, times, texts, screenshots. Make a folder. Make it clean." I almost smiled, because clean records were my language. I went home, pulled out a fresh notebook, and wrote across the top, "Lewis timeline." I listed each moment like a proof. The notary visit, the dinner invite, the attempted wire. Then I made a digital folder on my laptop, POA, bank, texts, and saved screenshots, forwarded emails, labeled every file. That night, Helen shoved her phone in front of me. Tara had posted a photo of their candlelit table, perfect plates, warm lighting, curated comfort. Caption: "Family loyalty is so rare these days." I didn't respond. I didn't call. Silence was part of the structure now. The next morning, Daniel called. "Ethan's advisor is dropping him," he said. "They don't want exposure. A door closing, clean and final." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept straight through, no ceiling, staring, no rehearsed conversations, just darkness and quiet. In the morning, my phone held one new voicemail from Ethan. No charm this time, just a tight voice. "Mom, we need to talk. Now." Ethan didn't wait for me to call back. By 10 a.m., he was on my porch, knocking like he still had rights here, firm raps, a pause, then another set. I checked the peephole first. His hair was slightly messy, his jaw working as if he'd been chewing on words all morning. He held his phone and keys like he might bolt the second the air turned against him. I opened the door halfway. "Mom," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside and let him in. Not because I wanted him here, because Julia had told me to let him show himself. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd read that clause and felt my life tilt. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't offer comfort. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the wood. "Okay," he began, breathy with practiced calm. "There's been a misunderstanding." I said nothing. The silence made him blink, like he expected me to help him find the story he wanted to tell. When I didn't, he rushed to fill it. "That transfer the bank flagged?" he said quickly. "It wasn't what it looked like. I was consolidating things, handling bills like I told you I would. That's all." His eyes kept flicking to my face, searching for the old signals, softness, worry, a question he could answer. I gave him none. "You didn't have to lock me out," he added, irritation slipping through. "Daniel overreacted. And Julia, she's making this bigger than it needs to be." I let that sit too. Let him hear his own words echo in the room. His confidence wavered. He sat back, rubbed his forehead, switched tactics. "Mom, I'm under a lot of pressure. Still nothing from me." He swallowed. and his voice dropped into something closer to pleading. "You've always been my safety net." The phrase hit me cleanly. Not love, not gratitude, function. "That's why you never learned to walk," I said quietly. Ethan stared like I'd slapped him with a sentence. His mouth opened, then closed. "That's not fair," he muttered, but it sounded weak even to him. His phone buzzed on the table. He snatched it up too fast. "Tara," he said automatically, then stood and turned away as if my small kitchen would become soundproof. It didn't. Her voice came through sharp and demanding. "Where are you? What did?" she say. "You told me you had access." "I'm handling it," Ethan hissed. "Handling it?" Tara snapped. "Then why is Daniel freezing things? Why is your advisor calling like you're a criminal? Fix it, today." Ethan's shoulders tightened. "Keep your voice down." "I'm not keeping my voice down," Tara said. "Get her to sign what she needs to sign or we're done. I am not going down with you." Silence. Then, colder. "Is she there?" Ethan's eyes flicked to me. I didn't move. "Yes," he admitted. "Put her on." Ethan froze, phone hovering, waiting for me to rescue him. I stayed silent. "She's not talking," he said, and it came out like defeat. Tara inhaled, furious. "Then make her." Ethan ended the call with a hard thumb. When he sat back down, the charm was gone. He looked smaller, cornered. "Mom," he started again, softer. "I didn't mean to." My phone buzzed beside my notebook. A preview flashed. Julia. "Court filing is ready. If he admits anything, don't interrupt." Julia didn't ask if I felt ready. She treated readiness like a luxury people used to delay action. 2 mornings after Ethan sat at my kitchen table calling everything a misunderstanding, I walked into a downtown Denver courthouse with Julia at my side. The building smelled like floor polish and old coffee. Keys clattered into plastic trays. Voices bounced off marble like everyone was trying to sound braver than they felt. Julia carried one slim folder. It looked too light for what it held. "You don't owe him eye contact," she said as we waited outside the courtroom. "You owe yourself a record." Inside, the air was dry and cold. Wooden benches, the state seal on the wall, a judge's chair that looked built for an institution instead of a person. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, posture straight the way I used to sit in parent-teacher conferences, calm on the outside, bracing on the inside. At 9:11, Ethan walked in. He entered like he expected to negotiate his way out of inconvenience. Tara was beside him in a cream coat, jaw tight, eyes already irritated. Ethan saw me and stopped short, confusion flashing across his face. "Mom?" he mouthed. I didn't answer. I didn't nod. I looked past him. Julia stood when the clerk called the case. Her voice was calm, precise, almost gentle until you listened closely and realized every sentence was a blade. "This is a matter of civil fraud and attempted financial exploitation," she said. "The defendant presented my client with documents designed to transfer control of all assets under the guise of a standard power of attorney, then attempted to execute transfers under that claimed authority." Ethan shifted hard in his chair. He leaned toward his attorney, an anxious man in a wrinkled suit, whispering fast. Tara's lips pressed into a thin line. Julia laid out dates, filings, the bank alert, the fraud flag. Then she handed up an exhibit that made Ethan's face drain. A signed page. Not mine, his. His signature sat there, clean and undeniable, tied to language that proved intent. Ethan stared at it like a man who'd just discovered his own handwriting can testify. The judge, a silver-haired woman with tired eyes, read for a long moment. When she looked up, her voice was flat and cutting. "This appears to be premeditated financial coercion." Tara made a sharp sound and stood abruptly. Her chair legs screeched. She hissed something at Ethan under her breath, grabbed her bag, and walked out mid-session without looking back. Ethan watched her go, panic flickering where confidence used to live. "Pending restitution," the judge continued, "the court will freeze relevant accounts to prevent further harm." Ethan's attorney started to protest. The judge cut him off with a glance. "Your client's own signature is the problem." When court adjourned, the hallway filled with movement voices, phones lifted, a local reporter stepping forward. "Margaret Lewis, can you comment?" Julia angled her body in front of me. "No comment," she said firmly, but I still heard the phrase floating behind us like a headline. "Retiree outsmarts family fraud." Outside, the sunlight felt too normal. My phone buzzed. "Daniel. Confirmed. Ethan's accounts are frozen." And behind me, Ethan's voice cracked through the courthouse doors, raw, desperate. "Mum, wait." The next morning, I woke to the steady buzz of my phone. Julia's name flashed on the screen first. Julia. Bank confirmed. Ethan's access revoked. Restitution process begins. I exhaled, but it didn't feel like relief. Not yet. The pieces had been set in motion, but the game was far from over. A message from Ethan followed almost immediately. "Ethan, we need to talk, Mom. You humiliated me." I stared at the text, the words like daggers wrapped in guilt. He was still trying to twist the narrative, to make me the villain in a story he wrote himself. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat down and opened my laptop. The inbox was flooded, local media, strangers, even some old colleagues. One message stood out. "Senior Protection Initiative. We've heard your story. Would you consider sharing it in a community webinar?" A few clicks later, I was reviewing a proposal to host an online safety seminar. 15 minutes. No drama, just facts about POAs, red flags, and how to protect yourself from financial exploitation. I saw my name in the proposal, and for the first time in days, I felt grounded. Daniel had suggested it. A simple, practical way to turn the chaos into something actionable. He was right. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who'd been too trusting or too overwhelmed to ask the right questions. That afternoon, Helen came over. I was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing the seminar slides. When she saw them, she crossed her arms, her usual skepticism replaced by something softer. "You didn't just survive," she said, her voice steady. "You taught." I nodded, unsure how to respond. This wasn't the path I'd chosen, but it was the path I was on now. Teaching, not just protecting. Then my phone buzzed again. Ethan, I'm sorry. Please call me." For a long moment, I stared at the message. I knew what it meant. The apology wasn't for me, it was to save him. I set my phone aside and clicked on the link for the webinar. The registration page was live. The fight was far from over, but I'd already decided how I'd win this. Not with anger, but with clarity. And the people who would listen not to the drama, but to the truth. The truth was mine, and I wasn't going to let him take it. The court's ruling was swift, and Ethan's fate was sealed. He was ordered to repay the stolen funds within 6 months. The courtroom was silent when the judge delivered the verdict. There was no joy in the moment, no triumphant feeling. It was just a formal conclusion to a long and painful chapter. Ethan didn't show up. His lawyer spoke in vague terms, offering hollow promises of repayment. But I knew better. I had already seen the truth of what he was capable of, and the court's decision wouldn't change that. It wouldn't change him. Tara, for her part, wasn't far behind. 2 weeks later, she filed for separation. I wasn't surprised. She had been part of the plan from the beginning, using Ethan's charm to secure her own life of luxury. But now, that life was crumbling. Her apartment in Cherry Creek felt like the last piece of the puzzle, the one that had always seemed too perfect to be real. I didn't need to ask what was going on. Tara's own actions were speaking for her. Her world was built on convenience and lies, and now it was falling apart. The money that Ethan was ordered to repay didn't sit in my account for long. I knew exactly where it should go, into a scholarship fund for adult learners. People who had put their dreams on hold because life got in the way. Education had always been my guiding principle, and now it was a way to restore some of the balance I had lost. Helen agreed, watching me set it up with a knowing look. She didn't need to say much. The quiet approval in her eyes said everything I needed to hear. With the scholarship fund set up, I finally found a place for myself, literally and figuratively. I bought a small mountain cabin under my trust's name, a retreat where I could breathe without the weight of the past suffocating me. It was my place, a space where I could think and rebuild. away from the noise of my old life. A few weeks later, Julia visited to finalize the last of the documents. As she handed me the final papers, I looked at her, grateful. "You saved me," I said softly. She smiled, the corners of her eyes softening. "No, you saved yourself. You read the fine print, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had everything I needed." The ruling came down hard, like the end of a storm. The court ordered Ethan to repay the stolen funds within 6 months. The judge's voice was calm, matter of fact, but it held an authority that couldn't be ignored. Ethan wasn't present, his lawyer spoke on his behalf, offering weak, empty assurances. But I didn't need to hear them. I knew better. I had seen who Ethan really was, and no amount of legal jargon could change the truth. Tara was the next to make a move. 2 weeks later, I received a terse message from a mutual acquaintance. Tara filed for separation. I wasn't surprised. She had always been with him for the comfort of a lifestyle, not for love. Now that the luxury was slipping through their fingers, so was she. Her departure wasn't a loss to me. It was just the last domino falling in their little empire of lies. When the funds from the court order finally landed in my account, I didn't hesitate. I knew exactly where it was meant to go into something bigger than any amount of money. I set up a scholarship fund for adult learners, a pool of money that would help people like me, people who had put their dreams on hold because life had other plans. I'd always believed in the power of education, and now I was going to use the funds to give others that chance. Helen was the first to congratulate me when she heard about it. She watched me set up the fund with a quiet smile, saying nothing but everything with her eyes. There was a strength in her that made me feel grounded again. Then, with the scholarship fund established, I turned my attention to something for myself. I had always wanted a place to retreat, somewhere I could clear my head and reconnect with what mattered. I bought a small mountain cabin, one under my trust's name. It was modest, simple, even, but it was mine. And it was a space where I could breathe, think, and for the first time in a long while, feel peace. The past couldn't follow me there. I could leave it all behind. Julia visited me a few weeks later. She came to finalize the last of the documents, and for the first time, she didn't look like the lawyer who'd saved me. She looked like a friend, someone who had been with me through the most difficult moments. We sat at my kitchen table in the cabin, the sunlight pouring through the windows, and toasted to a future that felt more solid than any of the uncertainty I had once lived with. "You saved me," I said, holding up my glass. Julia smiled, her eyes softening. "No, Maggie. You saved yourself. You read the fine print." I sat back and let her words sink in. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. I had taken control of my future, and in doing so, I had reclaimed everything I thought I'd lost. The past, with all its betrayals, was behind me now. The future, full of possibility, lay ahead, and I was ready for it. As I turned to look out the window at the mountains beyond, a message pinged on my phone. A name I hadn't expected. Ethan. I hesitated before opening it. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an apology. It was a simple, pointed request. "Ethan, I need the rest of my money. Please send it now." The silence that followed his message felt heavier than any courtroom. I set my phone down slowly, as if letting the weight of his words settle. But in the end, I knew there was no more negotiating, no more deals. He had taken enough. I smiled to myself and looked out at the mountains again. No more running, no more hiding. The truth had already set me free. The knock on the door came just after sunset, faint but clear. I had been watching the light dip behind the mountains, thinking about how much had shifted, how much I had shifted. The cabin, now a place of quiet, of peace, felt like a sanctuary, far from the life I once knew. But nothing stays hidden forever. I opened the door, and there he stood. Ethan. He looked smaller than I remembered. Time had taken something from him, but it wasn't just age or the weight of his decisions. It was the look in his eyes, empty, a little desperate, like a man who'd lost control of a life he thought he could steer. He shifted on his feet when I didn't speak, his hands stuffed in the pockets of a jacket that looked like it belonged to someone else. "Maggie!" His voice was rough. I lost everything. I stood there, my arms crossed loosely, the door still hanging open between us, not inviting him in but not closing him out. I didn't rush to say anything. I didn't need to. The truth had been laid out for both of us, and no amount of words would change it. He took a breath, stepping forward like it was the first time he had tried to say something real. "I thought you'd help me," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought you'd—" "You didn't lose me, Ethan," I interrupted, my voice soft but steady. "You gave me up. A long time ago." His eyes widened, but he didn't argue. He didn't have a defense for it anymore. There was no charm left to hide behind, no excuses that could fit into the reality we were facing. I watched him as the truth of it settled in, the weight of what he had done finally bearing down on him in a way he couldn't shake. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he said, the words tumbling out, more for himself than for me. "I was trying to fix things." I shook my head, a small, quiet motion. "You can't fix what you've broken by asking for more, Ethan." He looked down, rubbing his hands together, trying to gather his thoughts. "Then, can we start over?" he asked, lifting his eyes to meet mine. "A second chance?" There was a flicker in his gaze, a desperation I hadn't seen before, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But only for a moment. "Trust isn't inherited," I said, my voice even. "It's earned." Ethan flinched as if my words had struck him physically. He opened his mouth to say something else, but stopped, the silence thick between us, neither of us wanting to fill it. He stood there for a long moment, his shoulders slumping, the fight draining out of him. Finally, he nodded, though there was no conviction in it. "I understand," he said, his voice low. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to be said. We had reached the end of this road, and neither of us could go back. He turned slowly, walking down the porch steps with that same weight on his back, and I didn't watch him leave. I didn't need to. The door clicked shut behind me, and I leaned against it for a moment, eyes closed. For the first time, there was no anger, no need for revenge, just truth, and I was finally free. The mountains outside were still, silent, untouched. The world was quiet again, and this time, it was mine to keep. A few months later, I stood at the podium, the lights of the conference hall bright above me, facing a crowd of people who were there to listen. The event had been a blur of introductions, technical setups, and final adjustments. But now that I was here, my mind felt clearer than it had in years. This wasn't the stage I had imagined for myself, but it was mine. My foundation, my life's work now, had grown faster than I ever thought possible. What started as a simple scholarship fund had transformed into a statewide initiative for financial awareness aimed at protecting seniors from the kind of exploitation I had faced. It wasn't just about educating people on powers of attorney and fraud. It was about giving them the tools to protect themselves, about showing them that they didn't have to feel powerless when it came to their own lives. We had expanded into legal aid programs, partnering with nonprofits and local law firms to offer free legal advice for those at risk. We had counselors, workshops, and resources available to anyone who needed help understanding the fine print. I had thought about the future in terms of survival at first, but now it felt more like thriving. I was living in a world where I could help others not just avoid my mistakes, but build something better. A legacy that didn't rely on the deceit of others, but on the strength of informed choices. "Thank you all for being here today," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the room's quiet hum. When I started this foundation, I didn't know exactly what I was building, but now I see it clearly. A place where knowledge becomes power. The applause was warm but fleeting. I wasn't here for the applause. I was here to deliver the message. Financial literacy is not just a skill. It's a lifeline, I continued, glancing at the screen behind me where the next slide was ready. It's how we take back control over our lives, how we protect the things that matter most. Behind me, Julia sat in the front row, her presence a quiet anchor, though I knew she was more than that. She had been the voice of reason when I needed clarity. She had guided me with practical advice and wisdom, not just as my attorney, but as a friend, an ally who had seen the whole journey unfold and now stood beside me with pride. After my speech, the local news cameras swarmed. They called me the math teacher who outsmarted fraud. They interviewed me in short bursts, focusing on my story on the betrayal, the recovery, and the work I was doing now. But the truth, the real truth, was that this wasn't about me. It was about all of us, anyone who had ever been taken advantage of, and anyone who was still in danger of it. Julia had arranged for a televised award presentation that night, a recognition of my work. The lights in the studio were even brighter than those at the conference. It felt different in the TV studio, though. More polished, more artificial. "Miss Lewis, how does it feel to be here tonight?" the reporter asked, holding the microphone close to me. I smiled, but the weight of the past still lingered, no matter how much I had moved forward. "It feels like I'm finally where I was meant to be," I said, my voice clear. "But this work isn't about the awards. It's about people making informed decisions. It's about giving them the tools to protect themselves." As the reporter shifted his attention to the next segment, I felt a soft pressure on my shoulder. I turned to see Julia, standing next to me now, her hand steadying me. "You did it," she said, smiling. "You really did it." For a moment, I let myself bask in the quiet satisfaction of the truth. I had rebuilt everything that had been taken from me, and now I was helping others do the same. From the corner of the studio, in the shadows beyond the cameras, I saw him. Ethan. He stood there, his eyes watching me, not with anger, but with something different, something I hadn't expected. There was no hatred in his gaze, no accusations, just a quiet realization. The weight of his own mistakes settled into him, and for the first time, I wondered if he understood, if he finally saw the cost of his actions, not just to me, but to himself. Our eyes met for a brief moment. He didn't move closer. He didn't say anything. I turned back to the cameras and smiled, but this time, it was for me, not for anyone else. The truth, for the first time, was mine to claim, and nothing, not even him, could take it away. I finished the interview, but the memory of his face stayed with me. For a moment, I thought about all he had taken and all he had lost, and then I let it go. The past was finished. "Read what they ask you to trust," I had said earlier that evening, my words echoing louder than any applause. I meant it. And now, the world would hear it too. A few months after the televised award presentation, I stood at a podium again, this time in a small community senior center. The room was modest, with folding chairs lined up neatly and fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A row of old men and women sat in the front row, some wearing hats, some with canes, all of them looking at me with an air of quiet curiosity. It felt different, more personal, more real than the polished studio lights or the staged applause I had grown used to. This was where the real work was happening, the work that mattered. "Thank you for having me," I said, looking out over the crowd. "Today, I'm going to share with you what I wish I'd known years ago, the things that could have protected me and the things that can protect you." The words came easily now. Over the past few months, I had been traveling to senior centers, libraries, and community halls, teaching financial self-protection. It had become my mission, my way of sharing the lessons I had learned the hard way. I walked them through basic financial concepts: powers of attorney, fraud prevention, red flags, and the importance of asking questions before signing anything. The faces in front of me weren't just strangers. They were real people, people who had stories I would never hear unless I took the time to teach them how to listen to their own. "I'm not here to scare you," I continued, "but to arm you with knowledge, because knowledge is the best defense. No one should feel helpless when it comes to their own future." As I spoke, my mind wandered for a moment, back to the years I spent waiting for someone to protect me, to help me avoid the trap that Ethan had set. I had been so trusting, so sure that love, even familial love, would shield me from harm. But trust wasn't enough. Trust had to be earned. "Remember," I said, No matter who it is, family, friends, professionals, always read the fine print. After my talk, I mingled with the crowd, shaking hands, listening to stories, offering advice. Some of the seniors approached me with thanks, others simply with quiet nods, but it was the one pair of eyes in the back of the room that caught my attention. Ethan. I saw him then, sitting near the back, his face slightly hidden under the brim of a hat. He wasn't making eye contact. He wasn't even looking at me directly, but I knew it was him. The slump of his shoulders, the way he was trying not to be noticed. I hesitated, but only for a moment. I walked past him, my steps steady, keeping my focus ahead. Then, as I neared the door to the exit, I paused, my eyes drifting toward him. Our gazes met for a brief second. There was nothing left to say. No accusations, no anger, just truth, raw and plain. The truth that had taken so long to find, the truth that had brought me to this moment. I nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't for him, not really. It was for me. He didn't nod back. He just sat there, motionless. I left without another word. Outside, the cool air wrapped around me as I made my way to the car. Helen was waiting for me, as always, leaning against the door with her arms crossed. "You did it," she said, her voice low and proud. I smiled, but there was no triumph in it, only quiet satisfaction. "I did," I agreed. "And I did it without bitterness." Helen laughed, shaking her head. "Not an ounce," she said. "And without a single missed clause, I bet." We both laughed then. It was a sound that felt light, unburdened by the past. But even as the laughter faded, I knew there was more work to do. My book, Sign Here, Read Twice, had become a bestseller. I wasn't just speaking at senior centers anymore. People were calling from across the country, asking for my advice, wanting to know how to protect themselves. The book, the seminars, the advice, it wasn't just a way to make a living. It was my legacy. A legacy built on the lessons I'd learned the hard way, and it was mine to keep. As I drove home with Helen, I thought about Ethan, still sitting in that room, probably too ashamed to move, too ashamed to ask for forgiveness. His actions had cost him everything. He had lost more than I ever could. And somehow, that was enough. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth had set me free. The sun hung low in the Denver sky, casting golden light over the conference hall where I stood at the summit podium, finally at ease. The weight of the past had melted away with every word I spoke, and now, in this moment, I was more than just the woman who had survived. I was someone who had built something that mattered, a legacy that would outlast the hurt, the betrayal, and the chaos. The room had quieted, and the audience sat before me, listening. I took a breath, letting the silence stretch for a moment, savoring the feeling of calm that had taken so long to reach. "This isn't just about protecting our finances," I said, the words coming naturally, as if they were the truth I had always known but had to fight to express. "It's about protecting our dignity. It's about knowing who we are, understanding our worth, and trusting ourselves first." I paused, looking around the room at the faces who had come to hear my story, who had come to learn from it. People who were standing on the edge of something new, something transformative, just like I had been. "Trust begins with yourself," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "Not a signature, not a document. It begins with knowing that you are enough to protect what's yours." Applause rippled through the room, warm and genuine, but I barely noticed. I had heard the sound of approval 1,000 times before, at awards, at press conferences, at events that felt like the applause was for a version of me I didn't quite recognize. But today, this moment, this was mine. This was for me. As the room filled with clapping, I met Julia's eyes in the front row. Her face was proud but soft, like she had known from the start that I could do this, that I would. Beside her, Helen's smile was wide, her posture relaxed, more like a mother watching her child finally claim what was always meant to be theirs. I smiled back at both of them, feeling the bond that had carried me through, from the courtroom to this stage. I had learned from them, and now I was teaching in turn. After the talk, as the crowd began to disperse, I made my way outside, the late afternoon sunlight warm against my skin. The air smelled of fresh rain from earlier in the day, and for the first time in years, it felt like I could breathe again. Helen was waiting for me at the bottom of the steps, as she always had. Her arms were crossed loosely, her face relaxed in the way only someone who truly understood you could be. "You did it," she said, her voice low and full of pride. I nodded, the quiet satisfaction of the moment settling into me. I did. We stood there for a moment, the world around us moving at its own pace. It wasn't about the applause or the recognition. It was about what had changed inside me. The journey had been long and hard, but it had brought me here free, finally, and whole. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out as I walked toward the car. Daniel. Retirement account secure. Life's good. I smiled, a little laugh escaping me as I tapped out a quick reply. Me. Finally, it's mine. I slipped my phone back into my pocket as I climbed into the car beside Helen, the engine humming to life. As we drove away from the conference, I felt the sun on my face and the future stretching ahead, clear and open. I didn't need to look back anymore. I thought about the journey I had taken to get here. I thought about Ethan, and how he had asked me to trust him, how he had handed me a paper to sign, thinking I wouldn't read the fine print, but I had. I had read it, and I had rewritten the ending. My son had said, "Just sign this power of attorney, Mom." I had read the fine print, and I had rewritten the ending. For me, for the future, for the legacy that could never be stolen again.